On November 19th, 2004 was one of the worst days in NBA history as the Indiana Pacers were facing off against the Detroit Pistons at the Palace of Auburn Hills, where the Pistons played home games. This was a rivalry game as the two teams were two of the best in the NBA at the time, fighting for the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. But the game ended early as Pacers small forward Ron Artest had a beer thrown on him after he was fouled, and he ran into the stands to attack, causing a brawl from fans and players, breaking the unwritten rule that fans stayed in the stands, players stayed on the court, changing the game and changing the fortunes of the Pacers and Ron Artest forever. Today we're going to dive into how all this happened and what it affected in the NBA and these teams going forward. Today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide as you daily learn more about sports history, increasing your sports knowledge. As today, we learn about the Malice at the Palace. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, how many players got suspended from the Malice at the Palace? Now, coming into this game, the Pacers were 6-2, and the Pistons were 4-3, and they hadn't met each other since the Eastern Conference Finals in the previous year's playoffs, where the Pistons won in 6 games en route to the NBA title. And that conference finals could have been the Pacers winning and winning their first championship. So there was a lot of animosity between these two teams, as they were two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference and the league at the time. And the Pistons that year were led by head coach Larry Brown, and they had all-stars in Chauncey Billups, Richard Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Rasheed Wallace, and Ben Wallace. And that year, Ben Wallace would be named Defensive Player of the Year, third-team All-NBA, and him along with Chauncey Billups and Tayshaun Prince would all be named on the NBA All-Defensive Team. So they were a stacked team with a roster that could rival anyone in the league. And the Pacers were coming off a great season as well, as their head coach, Rick Carlisle, led them to 61 games the previous year. In the previous year, Ron Artest was the Defensive Player of the Year, made third-team All-NBA, along with his fellow teammate, Jermaine O'Neal, who made second-team All-NBA. And they also had Hall of Famer Reggie Miller on their team, who was playing his last season in the 2004-2005 season. And because these teams were so good, this game was nationally televised on ESPN. And as we mentioned, both teams had great defenders, and defense really dominated the matchup, as the Pacers got off quick to a 20-point lead 7 minutes before halftime. But the Pistons were able to cut that down to 16 by halftime and came out in the third on a 9-2 run. But the Pacers still had the lead heading into the fourth quarter at 80-64. And that didn't stop in the fourth quarter. Though the Pistons started the fourth quarter hitting a couple of threes, the Pacers were able to make some field goals of their own, taking the lead to 93-79 with 3 minutes and 52 seconds remaining. And though the game seemed like it was out of hand for the Pistons, most of the starters and key players of the game were still remaining in the game, as this was more of a pride situation, as the Pacers wanted to show that they could beat the Pistons this year, and the Pistons wanted to show that they were still the champs. And as the game dwindled down, with just under 1 minute left to go, the Pacers were winning by 15, 97-82, when Pistons center Ben Wallace fouled Ron Artest with a hard foul, slapping him across the back of his head as he attempted a layup. This caused a scuffle between the two, and Artest was kind of known as being a little bit of a hothead, and so he walked away, and the refs got together to see what they were going to do. Whether they're going to be an ejection, a technical foul, flagrant, and as they did this, Artest walked over to the scorer's table and laid down. An unusual move, but nothing that's considered crazy, as Artest was just trying to calm down from an intense situation. And while he was still fueled up, a fan threw a drink in a plastic cup at Ron Artest, hitting him in the chest. And Artest immediately reacted, jumping off the table and charging into the stands. And what's interesting when you watch this is like everyone kind of spreads and runs away, as you can see the anger in Ron Artest when you watch this video. He is looking for vengeance. It's like if a bull had gone up into the stands, you would run away too. And everyone ran, and Artest grabbed a spectator who he thought was responsible for doing it. Unfortunately, he found the wrong guy and was hitting the wrong guy. Now, Steven Jackson of the Pacers actually ran up to Artest to try to help him as well, as these two were fighting as they went. And this caused many fans to storm the court, and there was actually fighting on the court. As when they finally got Artest onto the court, he actually punched another fan, and then Jermaine O'Neal came running and punched another fan in the jaw while he was slipping on some liquid. It was a crazy, chaotic scene. Security took over as teams worked to take both their teams into their locker rooms to settle everything down and to end this commotion. As they got the teams into the locker room, they announced the game had ended early and to please, in an orderly fashion, make your way out. Now, this had repercussions a lot of ways, especially for the Pacers. Now, there were some for the Pistons, but the Pacers, who instigated a lot of this and caused a lot of the fighting, got most of the issues. Ron Artest was suspended the remainder of the year, losing out his entire salary. Steven Jackson was suspended 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal was suspended 15, which was originally 25, but they got reduced. Anthony Johnson was suspended 5 games of the Pacers. Reggie Miller got suspended 1 game. And for the Detroit Pistons, Ben Wallace was suspended 6 games, and Chauncey Billups and Derek Coleman and Elon Campbell were all suspended 1 game. And obviously, with all these suspensions, the Pacers fell apart. Their season ended with just 44 wins, 15 less than the year previously. They were able to make the playoffs, but lost in the semifinals as they didn't have one of their best players, Ron Artest, who was suspended the entire year. But this also brought criminal charges, as if you get in a fight in public, that can be assault, and there can be a lot of issues with that. So in December 2004, 5 Pacers players and 5 Pistons fans were charged with various assault and battery levels. Artest, Harrison, Jackson, and Anthony Johnson of the Pacers were charged with 1 count of assault and battery each, and 3 fans received the same charge. And all the players that were charged pleaded no contest to the charges. In September 2005, they were all given a sentence of 1 year probation, along with 60 hours of community service, a $250 fine, and anger management counseling. Now, the guy who threw the drink that started this all was named John Green, because not only did he throw the cup, when Ron Artest was attacking the wrong man, he actually came up and was hitting Artest. And he was sentenced to 30 days in jail with 2 years of probation and had been banned by the Pistons for life. Now, this caused a lot of issues as the NBA was battling with some image issues at the time. Everyone thinking the league was full of thugs, former gangsters, even though they weren't. Many of them were just players. But it changed a lot of the image. And the NBA instituted more security as they needed to make sure that fans didn't have as easy as access to the court as they did, as that caused a lot of the issues. And the league also limited the size of alcoholic drinks and would discontinue alcoholic sales at the end of the 3rd quarter to help limit issues happening at the end of games. Now, the following year, the Pacers would actually trade Ron Artest to the Sacramento Kings as they felt he could not play for the team anymore, starting a new era for the Indiana Pacers, and they still have yet to win an NBA championship. And many argue that 2004 team may have been the best team the Pacers had ever had and was lost out to this crazy event in these fights. Now, Ron Artest eventually changed his name to Meta World Peace and did win a world championship with Kobe Bryant and the LA Lakers, which is a little bittersweet for the fans of the Pacers as they just saw what could have been if he had stayed with their team. And this goes to show you how one moment can change the course of history. The Pacers could have kept their team together. If this didn't happen and the game ended 1 minute earlier, the Pacers may have won a championship, kept their team intact, and continued a dynasty. But instead, this broke their team apart, and they basically had to start rebuilding from that point on. And we're always going to be left with what could have been. And if you want more basketball history, check out the Dime Dropper podcast with Darian Vasari, who takes a look at the game of basketball and all the trials and tribulations of professional sports and the social impact it has on the game. And if you enjoyed today's episode of Daily Sports History, please make sure you like and subscribe wherever you're at. That's the best way so you do not miss a single episode. And we'll be back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question? How many players were suspended in this one game? There were 9 players suspended for this game, with Ron Artest, Steven Jackson, Jermaine O'Neal, Ben Wallace, Anthony Johnson, Reggie Miller, Chauncey Billups, Derek Coleman, and Eldon Campbell all being suspended with Ron Artest obviously getting the most, being suspended the rest of the season.